Okay. Hi everyone. I'd just like to introduce my friend Joy here, who's helping me out with my project. I chose to talk about South Africa, and the SDG goals that I'd like to talk about are number 4, which is quality education, and number 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions. So here's my friend.
Hi everyone, I'm Joy. I was born in Pietermaritzburg, which is the capital city of our province, KwaZulu-Natal. It's about 45 minutes from Durban, which is like a harbor city, and about 5 hours from Johannesburg, which is a major city in South Africa. Pietermaritzburg, not much happens there. They're just like shopping malls and shopping centers, but other than that, there's not much to entertain you there.
Okay. Just for my classmates, we actually did this interview earlier with another friend of mine. His name is Dane, who's also from South Africa, and I will be later on in my presentation, I will be talking about some of the things that he spoke about. Because of some technical difficulties, we had to reshoot and he was no longer available, but I think some of the things that he talked about during the interview were really not just interesting, but also important to what we are talking about now. So we will be remiss if we talk about anything South Africa if we don't bring up the issue of apartheid, right? And for those of us who are not really familiar with this concept, I will let Joy just give a brief introduction or talk about her experiences if she had any.
So apartheid is a government law of dividing or separating the different races. So if you were of one race, you went to one school, not one school, you were in a separate area, and you went to a separate school and you went to a separate hospital. Everything was very divided, and if you had to go to a different area, you needed to carry a pass to say that it was okay for you to be in that area. You weren't allowed to marry someone of a different race or a different race. It was illegal. You could go to jail.
So just can you give us like a little bit of an idea when you say different races, like what are the races that are prevalent in South Africa?
Okay, so we have like 4 major, but there are like a lot of other other races, but usually on a document. On a document, there's black, white, colored, and other. So other would be Asian or something else. So it's usually black, white, or an Indian. Sorry, 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So like I said, I'm not really familiar with the concept. I've heard about it a little bit through like pop culture and stuff that, like with Trevor Noah. So how does that work? So if you were, for example, if you were white, you couldn't marry somebody who was of any other race?
Yes,
Is that
yes.
correct?
So white people had to marry white people. Indian people had to marry Indian people. For instance, my grandfather is of German descent, and my grandma is from German descent, and my grandpa is Muslim, so they weren't never married. So my gran had my dad out of wedlock, but then he kind of lived in a mixed area.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is that okay to ask you? Like, would you consider yourself mixed, or is that how?
Yeah, I guess that's kind of a hard one for me because my mom is Indian, and we kind of really uphold a lot of Indian traditions, like Diwali at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's. I guess I could go both ways.
Okay. One of the other things was when we spoke before, apartheid ended in 1994, so you would have been really, really young at that time. But even after the policy or the law, do you think you still saw? Do you think you still witnessed the effects of it when you were growing up?
I did. So when the first elections happened, I was about 7 years old. So I remember like all the excitement of my parents being able to vote for the first time.
Okay.
There was like a long line. So before we would all be at the same school and stuff. After apartheid, you were allowed to be in a different school, but maybe because of distance or the area you stayed or finances, you pretty much continue to stay in the same school,
Okay.
like same area school. So I went to a mixed race school because it was in my area. So I
Okay.
went there until like the 9th grade. Yeah.
Right. And how do those policies affect like schooling systems? Like in Taiwan, if I understand correctly, your child gets to go to the school that is closest to your home, or depending on your district. Was it similar? Was the system similar in South Africa? Or?
I guess during apartheid it was similar that you went to the school because it was near, or you were not allowed to go to another one. But after that, I guess you were free to go wherever you wanted, if you had the finances. So in terms of the level of education, I did feel like I was missing out on
Okay.
quality education. Not saying that all mixed race schools are bad, but because it's government funded and government doesn't always allocate the same funding to all the schools. So I just felt like I got a not such a great education in my lower years.
Well, like I said, our friend Dane isn't here now to reiterate the points that he made, but just to give you guys an idea, he grew up a little bit
Maybe
late.
like 10 years later than I did.
Yeah, so around so he would have been going to school 10 years after Joy started, and he said at that time his experience in the educational system was very different. He called it a step towards the right direction in terms of accommodating more races, and when he was going to school he said that everybody was there. It wasn't just whites. It wasn't segregated. So in his classroom there would be people of all races.
Yeah.
Which I think wasn't really the case when you started.
Yeah.
school,
When I started, but there was, I guess, a change. I guess my sisters would have experienced the same. It just took a little while to kind of get off the ground. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear, right? But just aside from the educational system, I was just wondering, like, did you really notice, like, after going to college, or when you were trying to look for jobs, was there kind of a divide still? Was there kind of I don't know, like a bias, like, oh, we prefer to hire people from these races, or anything like that?
So one of the points that Dane put out was like there aren't many universities, so at the end of the day we all kind of landed up in the same university. But when they are hiring, or when they are or you are applying for something, there is a new system called BEE, which stands for Black Economic Equality, and there is a quota to get a certain percentage of people of different races. So it's not just all one race, it's kind of very diversified.
Okay.
But Dane felt like it was a little unfair because he didn't get the advantages of like he was passed over for some things because of the color of his skin. So we said it was a little bit like reverse apartheid. However, I said I didn't disagree with him, but I said I saw it both ways. I understand why the policy is there, why the quotas are there, because you're trying to uplift people who were previously not able to do so. However, I did see it wasn't like the most appropriate or the most fair. And that kind of BEE quota kind of goes from university education to any kind of job that you apply for in South Africa today.
Oh, just to be clear, Dane is white. He's a white South African. So I think that is why he was talking about maybe it was a little bit unfair because he felt looked over maybe during the time that he was applying for universities. I'm not sure if we mentioned it, but that program, it's kind of like a scholarship, right?
So he said he got, there is a National Student Funding Association that he wasn't able to get. It's more, you kind of have to pay it back later.
Okay.
But I think he did not get it because they were trying to fill a quota.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's still touching on the subject of like racial
inequality.
division. Aside from that, would you say there are other things that South Africa needs to work on? Maybe, especially now with COVID, like the effects of COVID, have you seen any sort of negative or maybe positive effects like in recent time?
I think just generally there is a big inequality there. The Gini coefficient is very large. The rich people are really rich, and the poverty level is like growing, or the people who are living below the poverty line. There are so many people, and I think COVID just exaggerated that.
Okay.
People were out of employment because a lot of people live like paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
So during COVID, when things were closed, they weren't able to work, so they didn't have money, so they didn't have food, and I think it really got really bad. I haven't been home for a while, but what I've been hearing, it's not good.
Well, you mentioned also in the earlier interview that your mom is actually an educator, right?
Yeah.
So has she mentioned anything, any changes lately?
At the moment, she's very overwhelmed, like post-COVID, trying to get everything, like paperwork and administration. But I think in the previous interview, I also mentioned that she's in a government school, and the funding there is also really poor. So the quality of education is decreased. It's very poor because educators are not really being paid very well. So a lot of them are leaving. So the quality of educators, they're pretty much getting anyone. The classroom sizes are really big. The resources are very scarce. So education from like grassroots, because she's a kindergarten teacher.
Right.
So from grassroots level is already like very poor. So it's already putting these kids at a disadvantage.
Mm-hmm. So would you say you're a little bit worried about the future, because obviously if the youth isn't getting the proper education, like what more like in the future when they're going to be responsible for jobs and stuff like that. There was another thing too, like in the earlier interview we talked about how like a lot of maybe your peers, or also Dane mentioned that these skilled and qualified people, they're choosing to leave South Africa because of the lack of opportunities. Would you say maybe that is also one of the reasons you're here in Taiwan now? Yeah,
like I think I mentioned in the previous interview that if I had the money and I didn't need a job, I would probably go back to South Africa and live there. I miss it. It has great potential. However, the economy and the job availability is very scarce. Or it is just difficult to find a good job.
Okay. Okay, well, I guess to sum up everything that we've talked about so far, in terms of the racial issues, it seems like there has been sort of a change through time, maybe not enough, but a gradual change at that. But it seems like it's not just racial issues now. There's class issues, still poverty, and it sounds like still a long way to go in terms of educational system planning.
At the end of apartheid, Nelson Mandela really tried to keep it peaceful. We had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He really tried to keep the country united. But in the 30 years, and the politicians who have taken over afterwards have been really corrupt, and the money that's supposed to go to different areas to uplift the community hasn't always gotten to the places that it needed to be. Mm-hmm. So it has caused a lot of tension and bitterness and protests in in recent years or recent months. So South Africa has like a great potential, but I think it is an issue from like governmental corruption needs to be like stamped out so that the money can go to the people who need to, and then it wouldn't be such a class issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if I'm just butting in there.
no. I'm just trying to. It's so hard for me to not be, to take myself out of the conversation, because the Philippines is going through basically this, not really the same, it's not really a division in races, but similarly like a division in classes, and we are going through a lot of issues with corruption and poverty, and we are not dealing with COVID really well. So when I hear you guys talking about like your home country and your sentiments about like, you know, wanting to go home, it really does like hit home for me, because that's exactly what I'm going through as well. I think a lot of people from the Philippines, I think, would share the same sentiments as people from South Africa. And in a lot of ways, I do feel akin to people from South Africa. Not always, but in a lot of ways. So yeah, I guess to end the interview, is there anything you'd like to say? Maybe hopes, or maybe certain issues that you'd really like your government to look into, or any last words before we...
Like I said, I really love South Africa. I think it has great potential, and I really hope that in the future I could go back and it would be a place of unity and peace and less corruption. Because I feel like a lot of people are placing blame on each other or on races, when the blame should really be the government and their corruption. I feel like the present government has really kind of turned the story to say, oh look, these people have so much and you have so little. Be angry at them, when it's kind of the government taking money. But yeah, if you ever visit South Africa, it's a beautiful place. There is so much to do, and it has a lot of potential, so I would suggest you visit.
Okay, well, Taiwan has a really good relationship with South Africa, so so I think that would be very easy for our Taiwanese friends to do, should they ever wish to do it. COVID permit. All right, so I don't want to take too much of your time. I know we could spend so much more time talking about all of these issues, and I hope someday we do have the chance to. But for now, I just want to thank you for giving a very good take to our interview.
No
Thank you so much.